In 1783, Britain acknowledged the independence of the United States of America. The new state conducted even more severe warfare against the native peoples than the British colonial powers had done. The fight against the settlers was continued by the great chief Tecumseh, Flying Arrow. After the deaths of his father and two eldest brothers, his third brother, Chesekau, took care of the young warrior's training. When Tecumseh was 13, he and his brother joined the Cherokees, who were fending off the colonists at the time. They spent 3 years here among constant clashes with whites in the southeastern region of North America. During his travels, Tecumseh became acquainted with dozens of tribes. Each was weak and defenseless on its own. But, like Pontiac, Tecumseh believed that they would become invincible if united. Tecumseh planned to create a Native American state, a united Indian nation, to counter the North American Union. When Tecumseh and his brother began organizing the Native Confederacy, aiming to stop the advance of the white man, Harrison, the governor of the territory of Indiana, tried to oppose him. Tecumseh rejected the agreement Harrison put forward in 1809, according to which the natives would have yielded a plot of land along the River Wabash and persuaded his comrades to defend this land. In response, Harrison decided to drive the Native Americans from their lands by force. His political wisdom and the courage he had proved in battle so many times, as well as his friendly but dignified manner of communicating, won Tecumseh many new supporters. After the assembly of representatives from all the tribes of Eastern America, which Tecumseh organized in 1807, the idea of a union of tribes began to take shape. For the first time, the tribes demanded that, if the USA wanted to purchase new lands in the future, they should negotiate not with separate native tribes, but only with representatives of the entire Native American people. At the following assembly in 1811, these tendencies grew evident. When General Harrison reproached Tecumseh for having created a union of native tribes, Tecumseh wittily retorted that the tribes had not protested when the white North Americans had created their federal state. What right, then, did the white man have to forbid the Native Americans to form a union of their own? The idea of creating a Native American federation was not the ultimate goal for Tecumseh. He wanted to banish the European colonists, if not from the entire territory of North America, then at least from a large part of the lands, so that the Native American Union would possess a vast and integral territory. Warriors from dozens of tribes answered Tecumseh's summons and gathered in a fixed place at the city of Tippecanoe. This city was to become the center of a new state of North American natives and the bulwark for their fight against the white conquerors. The young Republican nationalists of the Congress felt that their national dignity had been attacked. Supported by President Madison, the military hawks of Congress in spring 1812 began preparations for war, which by now seemed inevitable. In June 1812, war was declared on Britain, and the American troops launched an offensive against the British army scattered around the Canadian forts. At that time, bloodshed and war was part of daily routine in Europe, and France had occupied vast territories. Having defeated Spain, Austria, and Prussia, the French were now approaching the borders of Russia. Napoleon had established himself as Lord of continental Europe. After 1805, the war at sea developed very differently. A series of glorious victories by the British fleet proved its dominance. When Britain imposed a continental blockade along the northwestern coast of Europe, Napoleon responded by capturing trade vessels that were headed for their waters. The neutral America was at the epicenter of a terrific economic war and helplessly watched as its ships fell prey to both warring parties. In 1812, when war broke out between the USA and Britain, Tecumseh sided with the British and was made a brigadier general. At the head of a large squad of Native Americans, he led operations against the advancing U.S. troops, causing them considerable damage. Early in the War of 1812, General Harrison marched north at the head of a militia squad from Kentucky, and after a long siege took control of Fort Wayne. The British garrison put up a desperate resistance. Harrison's squad suffered heavy losses. The British soldiers possessed a much better military training than the American militia, but owing to their superiority in numbers and their perseverance, the American troops were able to force the British to leave the fort and retreat to the north. Britain's participation in operations in Europe left no possibility of sending reinforcements to its armed forces in British North America, which numbered 5,000 men at the time. The USA launched several forceful but badly planned offensives against Canada, which led to defeat. The reasons for their failure lay in the military superiority of the better-trained British regular army, as well as the patriotism of the French Canadians and the majority of immigrants from the former American colonies. Though in 1813 the Americans obtained control over the Great Lakes and plundered the Fort of York, they failed to annex the Canadian lands. Tecumseh, who had fought for the British, died on the banks of Lake Ontario on the 5th of October, 1813. The U.S. troops managed to eliminate the threat to their northwestern borders, but their attempt of aggression against Canada failed, because despite the war with Napoleonic France and the Continental Blockade, Britain preserved enough forces not only to defend Canada, but also to advance on the territory of the USA. The borders with Native American lands remained under dispute for a long time. The tribes actively opposed the attempts of colonial intrusion into their territory. As a result of successful military operations, Britain acknowledged the sovereignty of the American colonies. In 1783, they were forced to sign the Paris Peace Treaty, according to which the United States obtained their independence. After the end of the war, George Washington was unanimously elected the first president of the USA. Washington took up the post on April 30th and was re-elected in 1792. Under Washington, the territory of the state expanded fast. As a result of a deal with Spain, the borders of the U.S. and Spanish colonies followed the 31st parallel, which created excellent conditions for the conquest of the Wild West. In 1791, Vermont, a new northeastern state, was annexed. Kentucky followed in 1792, and Tennessee in 1796.